Let's take a look at mini split heat pumps, how to size them, what they are, how to install them, and see if we can't make some sense out of it. The basic setup is fairly straightforward. These are often called ductless systems because, of course, there are no ducts. And it looks a lot at first like a glorified air conditioning unit. But, of course, being a heat pump, it works both ways. You have an outdoor unit, which is either your condenser or evaporator, depending upon the time of year. The indoor unit, and then you have electrical wires running, power supplied to the outdoor unit, which in turn supplies power to the indoor unit via 4 wires, a ground, 2 powers, and a signal. And then the refrigerant lines. The refrigerant lines are normally 1.25 inches, and they are flexible tubing like PEX or garden hose. They're fairly a little stiffer than garden hose, but the idea is with those is that those will run out to the outdoor unit and it will pump the glycol or the other refrigerant as necessary to the unit. So it's a completely closed system. And then this indoor unit will have either a controller right beside it or usually just a remote control that the homeowner can adjust the temperature of the conditioned space. They are, in fact, heat pumps, as I said. So your system, it's totally reversible. It works just as it does before. You can pull heat from the house and expel it to the outdoors in the summer, and in the winter you can pull the heat from the cooler air. As normal in cold weather climate, you can have an electrical unit on this to defrost and handle any problems you might have with ice buildup on the coils. The idea that it's ductless and that you can have multiple units is the key advantage of using a system like this. Here we got a triple system, and the idea is that each of these, if they're separate like they're shown here, where they're all linked together to the main unit, then each of these is separately controlled, and you now have created a 3-zone system in your home, and you're only running 3-inch holes for each of these out through the outdoor wall. So it's actually less than that. This diagram isn't quite correct, because what you would actually have here is these 3 units will come down to a junction box, which we'll show in a couple of slides, and then you go out with 1 set of hoses. So you really only need a 3-inch hole going to the outside world. You run the mains and the electrical to the outdoor unit, and then you seal that, and then you're done. So it's a nice tight system. Works very, very well. But each of these red lines would represent your power lines and your refrigerant lines, supply return. So you're going to have 2 refrigerant lines, 1.5 inches each, and then 4 stranded wires, black, white, red, and green for ground. And those sizes are normally number 16. But they can be as large as 12 if this unit is large enough. So this is how you might do something like this bedroom. You'll notice that the placement of the system is where you would want to place a duct. It's facing on an outside wall. So if there's any draft from this large set of windows, which would be probably your largest heat loss, along with these 2 windows in the room, you're going to prevent that draftiness by having that nice warm air in the winter, and in the summer blowing cool air from the warm air seeping in from the outside. So placement of these can be on the ceiling like this. There are ceiling units that you can recess in, and that way you can have a 4-way louver to radiate heat out, or heat or cooling out in all 4 directions. The CFM can be controlled. The fans in these are controllable by speed, so you actually have some adjustment capabilities, more so than you might find in the hot air system. And as I say, you would normally place these units where you would put supply ducts. You don't have to worry about a return because there is no return system. The height that you mount the unit depends on the type. Most mount close to the ceiling, like the one we just showed, and have a downward push, but there are units that you can mount on the floor that push upwards, and there are ceiling units. Obviously, each unit represents its own zone. Units can be tied together in daisy chain, so what you can do is you can run the wires from the first unit to the second unit, and then from the second unit to outdoors. If you do that, you've now daisy chained the units, and that unit closest to the outdoor connection will then control both units, indoor units. So you can daisy chain, and that way you only need one controller to control them both. Smallest size of these indoor units start at around 150 square feet, and they go up to about 1,500. So our house that we're looking at in Project 3 is 2,000 square feet. You're going to need two. You're going to need, at the bare minimum, one downstairs, one upstairs. However, I strongly recommend that while that is a theoretical solution, I don't think it's a very good one, and I hope that you'll agree with me as you start to lay out where you want to put these, that two is not quite enough. We talked about that already. You can have up to 8 units on one outdoor unit. So you can have one outdoor system, and it will take up to 8 indoor units it can load. There are a few that do 10 now, but they're still very, very expensive, and I would recommend staying away from them. Besides, for this 2,000 square foot home, there's just absolutely no need for that. You don't need, to go any more than 8 on a unit. Just a little bit of describing, where we are. As you know, we are listed up in the top zone. You can see that on a square footage basis, 50 to 60,000 BTUs, and if you remember, our home came out at 54,000. So we're right about in this zone, and this is exactly right if you worked it out on a square footage basis. So no surprise there. Because remember, Watertown's over here. You can see right here in Albany, we're technically in zone 4, a little bit less. We get a little bit of warming effect from the Hudson River, and we don't quite get the prevalent winds that Watertown gets. So no surprise there. But we are in a cold weather climate, so I do hope that when you select your outdoor unit for me, that you will pick a cold weather climate unit for me, because that would gain full marks. You'll find that most websites do size by room footprint, and then they just tell you need this many BTUs. So you could just look at how much area you're trying to do at once in the home. Let's just use for example the first floor. If you look at the data, you'll see about 500 square feet of it is open, with the kitchen, the dining room, and the living area. So you look at about 500 square feet here, and you can see we run to this unit right here. We would get a 12,000 BTU unit, a 1-ton unit, and we could possibly mount that in. And you just have to tell me where that goes. And then you might want to do a smaller unit, because that bedroom's about 300 square feet with the bathroom, and you might want to do like a 7,000 unit down there, and then that might be enough to do the downstairs. So, you could use a chart like this. It's also listed in the text as well. This again is not the same for every vendor. I pulled this off of a Mitsubishi site, but you can take a look, and each of the vendor sites that I found, and I found several because I sized this project with about 3-4 different vendors for you just to make sure that it would work. and it's reasonably clear that they're all about the same size, and the footage doesn't vary by very much. The BTU, some of them will be at 5,500 as opposed to 6,000, but for, that kind of thing. But for the most part, they're all about the same size. Do use the same vendor throughout the system when you size it. You don't want to go mixing units. That's a very bad idea, because these systems are designed for a certain load. They're designed you want the voltage and current to be the same through each of the through the system. You want to be able to you don't want to mix and match too much, because different size motors and the outdoor indoor units, you don't want to start mixing and matching. In addition, they use different slightly different formulations for the fluid, so for the refrigerant, so you can't do that. You need to use one vendor, stick with them. And if it's the first one that pops up on your web sheet when you do a search in your Google or Bing or however you do it, that's fine.